Backlash from both sides of the aisle after President Trump meets with Vladimir Putin.
Ooh, yesterday was a day. Wendy Patrick is back with today's Inside the Law. This might become a daily segment if we keep this pace up. Wendy, good morning. Thanks for being here.
Good morning.
I was going to ask you to put this all, it depends on who you ask, what yesterday was, this meeting between Trump and Putin and the news conference, and where it ranks on the importance of, how did you assess what happened yesterday?
Well, I'll tell you, the president was in a tough spot. He was being called upon to publicly humiliate the president of Russia in front of the world, and everybody believes he should have said something stronger than he did. That seems to be the consensus. I don't think President Trump would disagree with that assessment at this point, and that will no doubt inform what his tweets are going to be from this point forward, where he'll have an opportunity to say what he needs to say to clean up what happened yesterday.
Then why didn't he?
Well, I think what we're seeing now is perhaps not understanding at the time the full force of the failure to at least say something a little stronger than he did, particularly in light of last Friday, where, remember, we had the indictment of what I'll call the dirty dozen. We've got the naming and shaming, the 12 names of the people that were involved in this hacking. And, while you might argue that indictment was more political than legal, it does lay out, it's what we call a speaking indictment. It lays out the sophistication that was involved in this successful hacking and dissemination of the information they stole, which, regardless of whether we ever extradite those 12 Russians, which we won't, we don't have that kind of a treaty currently.
Right.
But nonetheless, it lets us know what we have to preserve in terms of election security come November.
When you have so many people on both sides of the aisle upset, and every level of U.S. intelligence saying one thing, and the president going on the world stage standing next to the president of Russia, is essentially, for lack of a better term, throwing all of U.S. intelligence under the bus and saying, well, if he denies it, then he denies it. What does that do to everyone who works for U.S. intelligence, putting their lives on the line around the world? What does that mean to them?
Yeah, it's very bad for morale. Then that's an understatement of the day. And I think we're beginning to see what it means for them. We watched the reaction last night. Yep. We're still seeing it this morning. We've seen even some of the president's biggest allies coming out and questioning why that was the tactic he took. We've even seen some, it's always nice to have, a criticism paired with what we could have done better. Yeah. We've seen a lot of people saying, why not just call him out? Okay, I asked him, he denies it. I want him to know that if this ever happens again, or if we continue to find evidence or some kind of middle ground, my prediction is that that's what we're going to see.
Sure.
We're in damage control mode now, and the morale is low. That's the irony of it, is the president has great faith in the great men and women that compromise the intelligence community. So they are probably as confused as anybody else about yesterday's pronouncement,
Wendy, we talked
or lack thereof, I should say.
We talked about this yesterday. The president has a reputation for not preparing for meetings like this. Knowing what he was walking into, he had to have known how important this was, and everybody was watching and waiting for that. Why not be more prepared then to give the American people what they were looking for on both sides of the aisle?
Right, and that is the question that is hard to answer each and every time something like this occurs. This isn't the first time there's been a meeting that he's had plenty of opportunity to prepare for, that the delivery was substandard and was so different than what everybody was going to be asking, especially because the president knew about those indictments earlier in the week. They happened on Friday. They hung like a cloud over the summit, and you knew that was going to be the one focus everybody was going to be asking about, is they want to see something on the world stage. Now, I also can sympathize with the other side. Is it fair to expect that kind of public humiliation in front of the world? Is it fair to ask our president to do that?
Was it public humiliation that he expected? It was just pointing out a fact.
That's the counter argument, though. Everybody knows that Putin denied it. You wish we could hear what went on in that 90-minute meeting, because the two men must have discussed what was coming next.
From a legal standpoint, can we say these indictments are proof of election hacking? Define what the indictments mean. Is that proof?
That's the irony irony, Raul, is indictments are charging documents.
Right.
And so, ironically, what we've now done by naming these individuals is clothe them with the presumption of innocence. And Rod Rosenstein, remember, you heard what he said on Friday. Many people criticized him for that, for laying out the indictments and then saying, oh, we just want everybody to understand that these are just documents and these defendants are presumed innocent.
Right.
So before that, we all knew they did it. Now they're presumed innocent. So what it is it's the burden of proof is less than they need to prove at trial. But since this will never go to trial, we now have at least a lot more information.
It seemed like a lot of people thought Chris Wallace ended up taking Putin to task a lot more than the president did.
Yes, he did.
They wanted the president to do it. Chris Wallace ended up doing it.
Right, and you know, one of the things that I'm sure, one of the things that Putin did in that interview, as you saw he had a little smirk. He wouldn't take the indictment, the 29-page indictment, which of course I read by the pool this weekend, was not light reading, and no doubt that Putin already read it. There is no doubt of that. This guy's an ex-KGB agent. So Chris Wallace did take him to task, and maybe the president will in the next couple of days. Certainly that's what everybody is calling upon him to do, at least to some extent.
Oh, Wendy, thank you.
Plenty more to say.
Back tomorrow, back every hour. We have so much to talk about. We always
right.
appreciate you coming
Thank
by.
you.
Thank you. Still ahead here.